14. Melissa Goodwin. In 2021, an Australian former prison guard named Melissa Goodwin was accused of carrying on a romantic relationship with the teenage inmate named Corey London at a prison in Sydney. But as it turned out, that was just one of the jailhouse affairs the 27-year-old corrections officer got involved in throughout her career. Shortly after her arrest, it was revealed that she'd had an inappropriate relationship with Caleb Valeri. Caleb was a former inmate, aspiring rapper, and notorious member of the Rebels outlaw motorcycle gang. When the scandal first surfaced, Goodwin denied the misconduct. Included among the allegations were accusations of clandestine hookups inside janitors' closets. Goodwin ultimately pleaded guilty to one count of engaging in a relationship with an inmate. Despite her morally wayward transgressions, she was spared from prison time and was instead sentenced to a 1-year community supervision order. But she did lose her job, prompting her to take her career in a totally new direction as a feminist influencer. In 2023, the Daily Mail reported that Goodwin had traded in her blonde locks for a new brunette hairstyle. She also got a breast augmentation and was in the process of undergoing admittedly painful laser sessions to remove an infamous Lotus-style neck tattoo that helped land her at the center of news headlines after news of her inappropriate relationships first surfaced. Goodwin described the tattoo removal process as excruciating, despite her use of numbing cream. Thankfully, she was just 4 sessions away from being done with the treatments. In addition to rebranding herself as a social media influencer, she expressed other career aspirations, including a goal of someday working in counter-terrorism. Whether or not she'll achieve her vision remains to be seen. 13. Ricky Scott Sr. In early 2024, the East St. Peter Missionary Baptist Church in Abbeville, Mississippi announced the firing of its pastor, Ricky Scott Sr. It was likely no coincidence that Scott's firing came just days after a TikTok video featuring his alleged mistress went viral. The shocking footage showed the mistress, Ulana Chandrea Beavers, attacking Scott's wife, Sharon Scott, at the church, prompting the Lafayette County Sheriff's Office to intervene. Beavers, who'd been a parishioner of the church for around 5 years leading up to the disastrous encounter, was escorted off the property by a sheriff's deputy. In the video, congregation members could be heard calling on Scott to step down from his position. Despite this, Scott refused to leave willingly, and despite the philanderous nature of the allegations against him, Sharon Scott stood faithfully by her man in the pulpit, pointing out that everyone makes mistakes. Sharon even went as far as taking responsibility for her husband's cheating, based on the fact that she and him are one. But it wasn't long before Ricky Scott's higher-ups decided that there was no room in their church for the type of activity he was allegedly engaging in. A few days after the video surfaced, the church posted a statement on Facebook clarifying that it was no longer affiliated with Scott in any way. 12. Rebecca Martinez and Eamon Fondren. Like with most professions, police officers are not supposed to deal with their personal lives during their working hours. Former San Antonio cops Rebecca Martinez and Eamon Fondren apparently missed this page in the police officer handbook, or perhaps they ignored it. Either way, the outcome was not good when they were caught sleeping together while working the night shift. The illicit relationship was first discovered by Fondren's then-wife back in 2016, according to reports obtained by local news station KSAT. She went through her husband's phone and found text messages that unquestioningly surpassed the normal boundaries of a friendship between co-workers. In fact, the conversations contained details about Martinez and Fondren's on-the-clock trysts, as well as the lengths they went to hide their activities from Martinez's ex-boyfriend, who was also a San Antonio police officer. According to police, Fondren did not deny the illicit encounters detailed in the text messages, but he claimed that they took place while off-duty. He was then accused of disabling the GPS in his patrol car in order to obscure his location, rushing to crime scenes in order to hide where he'd been, and failing to activate his dashcam while en route to calls, as required under department protocol. Fondren allegedly claimed that supervisors near the scenes of his calls told him verbally that he did not have to activate his in-car camera, but these claims were reportedly refuted by the individuals who would have been on duty and in charge of Fondren at the time of the calls. At the same time, however, Fondren's attorney was able to procure witnesses who testified that they had, in fact, received verbal instructions contrary to department policy during those specific calls. Fondren's lawyer also denied that his client lied at any point throughout the investigation, claiming that the text messages between Fondren and Martinez merely depicted fantasies. The attorney did not challenge the actual content of the message, but instead had apparently come up with a seemingly plausible explanation for them, while continuing to deny that Fondren committed misconduct while on the clock. An arbitrator who oversaw the case disagreed with Fondren's lawyer, noting that Fondren admitted that someone who read the text messages could reasonably conclude that he and Martinez had slept together while on duty. Therefore, according to the arbitrator, it made sense to conclude that that had actually happened. Both Fondren and Martinez were fired from their jobs, although the rulings behind their termination vastly differed when it came to the reasons for letting each of them go. Martinez was reportedly fired for using her personal cell phone to take a photo of Fondren's wife as she was placed under arrest for allegedly assaulting Martinez. Regardless of the precise reasons, the bottom line is that the illicit affair led to 2 police officers losing their jobs and resulted in the destruction of at least 1 marriage. At the end of the day, it's safe to assume that neither party would say it was worth it. 11. Timothy Henderson. Judges are supposed to be fair and impartial, which is impossible when they're sleeping with one of the parties involved in a case they're overseeing. But this didn't stop Timothy Henderson of Oklahoma County, Oklahoma from allegedly having affairs with multiple female lawyers. He resigned in March 2021 after 3 women accused him of misconduct. In his resignation letter, Henderson wrote, "I admit my conduct brought discredit upon the legal profession and was prejudicial to the administration of justice." He also waived any and all right to contest the allegations. But he maintained his right to practice law, as long as he fully complied with the conditions and procedures. Henderson spent nearly a decade on the bench after being appointed by former Governor Mary Fallin. He oversaw a number of high-profile cases, including the trial of former Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw, who was sentenced to life in prison for victimizing women while on patrol. According to news reports, some of Henderson's alleged victims were female prosecutors who pursued cases in his courtroom. Due to these suspicious connections, at least 1 case that Henderson presided over was overturned after the allegations came to light. In 2023, more than 2 years after he stepped down from the bench, Henderson resigned from the Oklahoma State Bar. It's unclear what caused him to change his mind about continuing to practice law, but he apparently gave up that desire and decided to move on with his life entirely. 10. Tanji Coleman. In 2008, the family of an elderly Michigan man named Frank Calcaterra hired a home care aide named Tanji Coleman. Coleman was hired to help take care of his wife Johnny, who suffered from dementia. At the time, Coleman had a warrant out for her arrest, but the Calcaterras and the company she worked for were apparently unaware of this. Court documents would later claim that Johnny's jewelry began to disappear almost immediately, along with the small fortune Frank had amassed through years of hard work. When all was said and done, estimates would put the losses at somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million. According to the Detroit Free Press, by the time Johnny passed away in a nursing home in early 2012, Coleman and her mother were living in the Calcaterra's lakefront home, and Frank had been relegated to sleeping in the basement. Several months later, Frank married Coleman in Ohio without his family knowing about it. He was 86 years old at the time. Coleman was 35 and had finalized her divorce from a previous husband 2 weeks before her marriage to Frank. The senior citizen later said that Coleman told him he needed to marry her because she was waiting for a lawsuit settlement, but couldn't be paid until she had someone to help her oversee the money due to her poor financial management habits. Journalists from the Detroit Free Press failed to find any record of such a lawsuit ever existing. By the time Coleman and Calcaterra married, at least 2 complaints detailing suspected financial exploitation had been filed with Adult Protective Services. A caseworker noted that Frank said he was aware of the allegations against Coleman and that he'd acknowledged giving her access to his finances. He seemed aware of the situation and denied that he was being financially exploited. Investigators visited a few more times, but Frank continued to send them away. Frank's adult children remained convinced their father was being taken advantage of. They faced further roadblocks as they continued trying to get authorities to investigate the case. Because he and Coleman were married, the family was often told that it was a civil matter rather than criminal. In the absence of a criminal case, they took law enforcement's advice and filed a civil lawsuit. The family also took measures to protect Frank and any income that he would receive in the future, since all of his money was completely gone. They removed Frank from his home, and a court-appointed conservator took over his finances. Coleman denied exploiting her husband and accused his family of abducting him. She was never criminally charged, but a judge annulled the marriage, ensuring that she had no legal claims to Frank's estate. 9. Douglas Darnborough. During the fall of 2023, authorities in New Bedford, Massachusetts received anonymous letters claiming that a local judge had had a romantic relationship with an assistant district attorney who pursued cases in his courtroom. The allegations prompted an investigation, and Douglas Darnborough quietly resigned from the bench shortly thereafter. According to one of the anonymous whistleblower letters, Darnborough and the ADA started going out for drinks, then got romantically involved. The letter also claimed that the pair began to coordinate cases to ensure that they'd be working together. Other letters contained more graphic details, including times and locations of alleged steamy encounters. Darnborough stopped showing up at court shortly after the letters began arriving. By the time he resigned, he'd already presided over at least 2 criminal cases prosecuted by the ADA that resulted in convictions of the accused. Gerson Pascual Santana and Jonathan Raskow had both been found guilty of committing 2 separate brutal attacks and had each been sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Upon learning of the inappropriate relationship, Pascual Santana and Raskow sought to have their convictions overturned, claiming that the judge's relationship with the ADA fatally compromised their right to a fair trial. Both men are currently serving their prison sentences. They're being represented by defense attorney James McKenna, who recently asked a different judge to order the Bristol County District Attorney's Office to turn over records of its investigations into Darnborough's misconduct. The order was granted in January 2024. According to McKenna, both Darnborough and the ADA were at fault for failing to disclose their relationship while continuing to work in the same courtroom. He described the ADA's actions as egregious prosecutorial misconduct, but it's unclear whether she'll face any consequences for her role in the alleged illicit relationship. As of early 2024, the claims about the affair remain unsubstantiated, despite Darnborough's decision to step down from the bench. The judge overseeing McKenna's clients' cases rejected their appeals, and for now, Pascual Santana and Raskow remain behind bars. The outcome of the situation involving Darnborough and the ADA remains to be seen. 8. Jill Curry. While employed as a civilian worker at the Washington County Jail in Oregon in 2014, Jill Curry began a steamy affair with a 25-year-old gang member and inmate named Jang Lee Delgado Galban. On at least 13 occasions throughout that year alone, she snuck the maximum security inmate out of his cell and into a nearby supply closet for a stealthy quickie. Before each meeting, Curry waited until the sheriff's deputy who worked in the control room went to lunch. She then unlocked Delgado Galban's cell and 2 other doors so he could get to their meeting place. Curry was busted after an anonymous tipster reported the illicit relationship to law enforcement. Investigators soon discovered that in addition to the steamy closet sessions, she had been putting money on Delgado Galban's books and writing him letters under an alias. Authorities charged Curry with 12 counts of felony misconduct and more than a dozen misdemeanors. Shortly after her arrest, her husband, a sheriff's deputy, filed for divorce. After turning down a plea offer that would have sentenced her to 36 months in prison, she pleaded guilty to all counts. She tearfully apologized for her behavior and for putting her colleagues in danger, but the judge doubted her sincerity and sentenced her to over 4 years, more than double the time recommended by prosecutors. During the investigation into Curry's misconduct, police discovered that another civilian employee, 32-year-old Brett Robinson, also had inappropriate relations with Delgado Galban. According to authorities, Robinson was also a control room employee. She let Delgado Galban out of his cell at least 6 times, but instead of hooking up in the supply closet, they met on the control room stairs. The 2 women were unaware that they were both sleeping with the same prisoner. After being caught and charged with 12 counts of misconduct, Robinson tried to argue in court that she was not guilty due to mental health issues. Her lawyer claimed that she was delusional during the encounters with Delgado Galban and that her actions were therefore involuntary. But the judge denied the defense's request to present this argument at trial, and Robinson ultimately pleaded guilty as charged. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 7. Fatima Williams. An 89-year-old widower from Florida named Jack Adler was shopping at a Costco store in Florida one day in late 2010 when he met a woman in her early 40s named Fatima Williams. They soon began going on lunch dates and shopping trips several times a week at Adler's expense. These outings typically involved stopping at a bank or ATM to withdraw money. Over an 11-week period, Adler withdrew more than $129,000. He took as much as $800 from the ATM during each visit and wrote checks for up to $60,000 at a time. According to court records, he suffered from an age-related cognitive disability, suggesting that he may not have been fully aware that he was being swindled by someone who may not have wanted a genuine relationship with him. Adler's son, Alan, told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that his dad's mental decline wasn't very noticeable at first. He didn't show typical signs of dementia, like forgetfulness, but the disease affected his judgment. Alan was unaware of his dad's relationship with Williams until the elder Adler told him that he was no longer driving and that he relied on his girlfriend to drive him places. During the conversation, he couldn't remember Williams' full name. Suspecting his father might have fallen victim to a swindler, Alan and other family members looked into Adler's finances and quickly realized that there certainly was a problem. At his son's urging, Adler called Williams while Alan listened in and asked her if she had taken money from his bank account. Williams allegedly replied by asking if the bank had called Adler or if his family was asking him about his finances. Adler told Williams that his family had asked and that they were with him at that very moment. She then admitted to taking money from his bank account and said, "You told me I could take money out anytime I wanted, remember?" Long story short, the authorities got involved and Williams pleaded no contest to one count of elderly exploitation. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and paid $60,000 back to Adler per the court's orders. Williams allegedly struck again 5 years later in 2016 when she was accused of exploiting another 89-year-old man in Boca Raton. The senior citizen, who had no family to speak of, was residing in a living-assisted facility at the time. But there were people looking out for him, including an administrator at his residence, as well as a bank manager who called the state's abuse hotline. The allegations dated as far back as 2013, when a staff member at the facility accused Williams of trying to control who visited the man. She also allegedly wanted any mention of dementia wiped from his file, and to have other involvement in his care that made employees question her motives, especially as a non-relative. In 2014, a bank employee became concerned because Williams was reportedly trying to add herself to the man's account. The banker was well acquainted with the man and found the situation highly questionable, given his history of being extremely watchful of their finances and his noticeable mental decline in recent years. At some point during a 3-year period, Williams became his power of attorney, an agreement which the Broward County Sheriff's Office accused Williams of persuading the man to sign, knowing that he was unable to consent due to his condition. According to authorities, Williams obtained more than $385,000 worth of goods and cash, including a BMW. When she learned that the man's finances were under investigation, she allegedly got rid of the BMW and settled for a less conspicuous Hyundai. A warrant for Williams' arrest was issued in 2015, but she was hard to find. Her arrest came the following year when her casino card alerted security that a possibly wanted person was in the building. Williams' lawyer told the Sun-Sentinel that his client did not exploit the alleged victim and that he was confident she would be exonerated of the charges she faced, but the outcome of the case is unclear. 6. Sol Wachsler. While serving as the chief judge of the New York Court of Appeals back in 1988, Sol Wachsler had an affair with a woman named Joy Silverman. At the time, he was the co-executor of Silverman's stepfather's estate and a trustee who was tasked with overseeing $24 million worth of trusts that were connected to the estate. After Silverman ended the affair in September of 1991, she accused Wachsler of harassing her. In 1992, Wachsler was charged with multiple federal crimes, including extortion, racketeering, and blackmail. According to prosecutors, he had demanded a $20,000 blackmail payment in exchange for turning over compromising photographs and tapes of Silverman. In other words, it was essentially a revenge porn threat before the concept as we know it today existed. Wachsler was also accused of threatening to kidnap Silverman's daughter, which he eventually pleaded guilty to, along with admitting to harassment. The conviction marked the end of his judicial career, and he was sentenced to 15 months in federal prison. He was released after serving 13 months and went on to become an accomplished writer, mental health advocate, and law professor. In addition to writing a memoir, Wachsler became a critic at large for New York Magazine. His law license was restored in 2007, and he's currently an adjunct professor at Toro Law Center in Long Island, New York. There's no excuse for Wojtyl's crimes, but his case admittedly shows that some convicted criminals can redeem themselves for their past mistakes and pursue meaningful futures. 5. Pregnant prison guards. In a shocking case that made national news headlines in 2013, more than 36 employees and inmates at the infamous Baltimore City Detention Center were federally charged with smuggling drugs and other contraband into the facility. The defendants were accused of working in cooperation with incarcerated members of the Black Guerrilla Family Gang. More specifically, 13 female corrections officers, 7 inmates, and 5 civilian co-conspirators were hit with charges of racketeering, money laundering, and possession with intent to distribute. According to court documents, the accused guards profited to the tune of thousands of dollars by smuggling drugs, prescription pills, cigarettes, and cell phones into the jail as part of a sophisticated and long-running operation in collaboration with the gang. They reportedly snuck the contraband into the facility by hiding it in their shoes, because they weren't required to remove their shoes as part of the standard security check they went through while entering the building each day. The corrections officers were instrumental in enabling the incarcerated gang members to continue running the criminal enterprise from behind bars. Inmate Tavon White had his accomplices wrapped around his finger to the point where he'd made as much as $16,000 per month as the operation's ringleader. He also impregnated 4 corrections officers during the 4 years he spent in pre-trial detention at the jail, and 2 of the women had his name tattooed on their bodies. The guards, Jennifer Owens, Katara Stevenson, Shania Brooks, and Tiffany Linder were among those charged in the scheme. In early 2015, White pleaded guilty to a federal racketeering charge and a state charge of attempted murder. He's serving concurrent sentences of 12 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release in the federal case and 20 years for the state case. Out of the 44 individuals who were ultimately arrested in connection with the smuggling operations, at least 40 were convicted, including 24 corrections officers, and many served prison sentences for their roles in the illicit scheme. After housing prisoners for more than a century, the notorious jail was shut down following the scandal. Demolition on the building began in 2019 and was completed in 2021. 4. Ana Betty Molina and Javier Molina. After his wife of 70 years passed away in 2012, Gustav Shapiro hired Ana Betty Molina as his housekeeper. Around the same time, the 95-year-old from Montgomery County, Maryland, began showing signs of delusional thinking, which played a role in his decision to cut ties with his adult son. Shapiro was also lonely and depressed, making him a prime target for an opportunist looking to swindle big bucks out of a vulnerable and unsuspecting senior citizen. With Shapiro's last remaining family connection severed, Molina and her husband Javier began helping themselves to the elderly man's money in 2013. The couple withdrew thousands of dollars at a time from the victims' accounts and deposited into their personal accounts. And they most likely accomplished this by misleading Shapiro regarding the nature of his relationship with Molina, which at the very least overstepped the boundaries of a caretaker's typical role in a patient's life. On one occasion, the Molinas obtained $300,000 of Gustav's money in one fell swoop via a cashier's check. Much of this activity was carried out with the victim's permission, but his ability to understand and consent to these transactions was questionable at best due to his ailing mental faculties at the time. Records later showed that the Molinas gambled away much, if not most, of the money. When their habit was at its worst, they were squandering an estimated $60,000 to $70,000 per month. The couple also paid their daughter's college tuition and bought a car and a house, which they moved Shapiro into. Shapiro eventually granted Anna power of attorney over his assets, including a home he'd owned since 1957, and listed her as the sole beneficiary of his will. Meanwhile, his mental state only continued to decline. Concerned bank employees called Adult Protective Services for the first time in 2013 after noticing the dramatic increase in Shapiro's banking activity. He was uncooperative with investigators, who eventually convinced him to allow a home visit and ruled that he was capable of making his own decisions and not in any danger. The case was closed and the theft continued as Shapiro became increasingly confused from dementia and old age. He also became more agitated, and while his aggression was blamed on his medical conditions, at least one person would later testify that Gustav knew that Anna had taken all his money and that there was almost none left. People also noticed that Anna had stopped keeping up with Gustav's care, and she began making comments about waiting for him to die. He passed away in 2016, 3 months into the third Adult Protective Services investigation into his well-being and Anna's questionable control over his finances. The full scope of the Molinas crimes was finally discovered after Shapiro's death, and justice came calling shortly thereafter. Anna and Javier were convicted of 5 felonies, including theft, conspiracy to commit theft, financial exploitation of an adult over 68 in an amount over $100,000, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The judge sentenced Anna to 10 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, while Javier received a 6-year sentence followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. 3. John Kevin Carey. While the law varies from one place to the next, attorneys are not always specifically banned from sleeping with their clients, but they are usually prohibited from doing anything that would constitute taking unfair advantage of a client. This stems from a lawyer's heightened duty of loyalty and due care to the people they serve, which thereby makes it automatically inappropriate for them to have romantic relationships with their clients in the vast majority of cases. But a shocking number of attorneys are accused of overstepping this ethical boundary, including John Kevin Carey, who allegedly stepped with a client he represented in multiple cases, including her divorce. Carey's relationship with the woman reportedly had a negative impact on her divorce case, catching the attention of the Florida State Bar. According to court documents, Carey acknowledged that he should have not seen his client romantically while representing her. The report also accused him of acting unprofessionally toward the woman's ex-husband and his lawyer throughout the divorce proceedings. Carey's client/romantic interest told the court that the attorney did not exploit her and that she was satisfied with his representation. Meanwhile, Carey described their interactions as a mutually consensual relationship, adding that he continued to act in the capacity of his client's attorney even after things went from professional to, well, not so professional. Despite this, the bar decided that Carey's conduct was nevertheless inappropriate and ruled to suspend him for 90 days. Speaking with Above the Law following the decision, legal ethics advisor Jan Leslie Jakubowicz admitted that lawyers are human and that the close interactions they have with their clients can lead to powerful emotions. But as Jakubowicz also pointed out, attorneys have a duty not to act on certain impulses or feelings. In addition to being suspended for 3 months, Carey was sentenced to 2 years of disciplinary probation. He was also ordered to attend the Florida Bar's ethics school, presumably for a refresher course on the lines that he's not supposed to cross. All things considered, the outcome could have been worse, but it also didn't exactly represent the most stellar turning point in Carey's career. 2. Richard Baumgartner. Tennessee judge Richard Baumgartner was highly praised for most of the nearly 2 decades he spent on the bench. Known for being fair and ethical, he oversaw several high-profile cases, pushed for cameras to be allowed in courtrooms, and established a drug court program in Knox County that served as the model of similar programs throughout the state. Baumgartner's disturbing fall from grace began in 2006 when he got hooked on painkillers that were prescribed to him for a broken toe. Starting in late 2007, Baumgartner started doctor shopping and received pain pill prescriptions from at least 12 doctors, including a veterinarian, amounting to more than 2,200 pills over a 2-year period. He was also an alcoholic. When doctors became unwilling to continue writing prescriptions for Baumgartner, he turned to probationers and drug court participants, whose cases he oversaw, to help him obtain drugs on the black market. In 2009, a drug court participant named Dina Castleman asked Baumgartner for help getting a job. Instead of helping the woman in her search for honest work, however, Baumgartner paid her to find pills for him and pressured her to become his mistress. He also bought her a cell phone for arranging the drug transactions. Baumgartner's substance abuse became noticeable to others. He began showing signs of impairment on the bench and frequently smelled of booze. His need for pills became so out of control that he sometimes made drug deals during court breaks. The judge's colleagues also started catching on to his affair with Castleman, who had criminal cases that were being overseen by other judges. In addition to urging at least one judge to drop charges against the young woman, Baumgartner convinced another judge to vacate an arrest warrant by lying and saying that he was working with Castleman to sort out her court matters. In 2010, he pressured a prosecutor for leniency in one of Castleman's cases. When Castleman failed a drug test for a sober housing program, Baumgartner called the director and said that she'd actually tested clean. State authorities eventually launched an investigation into the rumors and allegations surrounding Baumgartner's drug use and arrested him for his alleged crimes. In March 2011, he resigned from the bench and pleaded guilty to official misconduct. Baumgartner was spared from prison time in the state's case, but was sentenced to 6 months behind bars after being convicted in federal court of lying to investigators. He was also disbarred, and many of the high-profile defendants who were convicted in his court were granted new trials due to the possibility of the judge making decisions while impaired. Baumgartner died from natural causes at the age of 70 in 2018, following years of declining health. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Linda Haddad. While working as a criminal defense attorney in Florida in 2016, 43-year-old Linda Haddad grossly blurred the lines between her personal and professional life. She was ultimately disbarred for having illicit encounters and using drugs with her clients. According to court documents, Haddad's pattern of misconduct included allegations of inappropriate intimate relationships with at least 2 clients who were being detained at the Volusia County Jail. The disgraced former attorney also reportedly engaged in steamy phone calls with the individual she was representing, which were recorded by the jail. During questioning, she allegedly admitted to kissing one of her jailed boyfriends during a visit at the facility. The allegations against the wayward attorney also included running late for hearings, neglecting certain clients' cases, and failing to respond when authorities began investigating the complaints against her. Additionally, court documents state that in 2015, Haddad filed a motion to modify the sentence of an inmate she was intimate with, who she was not representing at the time. In August 2015, police attempted to stop Haddad in Daytona Beach for an expired tag. Instead of pulling over, she led law enforcement on a high-speed chase, and a police helicopter was brought in to help track her. The pursuit finally ended with the use of stop sticks, which disabled Haddad's vehicle. In addition to losing her license to practice law, she pleaded no contest in criminal court to driving with a suspended or revoked license and fleeing or attempting to elude with lights or sirens active. The judge found Haddad guilty and ordered her to complete a 90-day inpatient behavioral health program.
Number 10. The Vampire Couple. How many of you wanted a vampire as your partner after watching Twilight? 20-year-old Leah Benninghoff and 38-year-old Aro Draven are the real-life Edward and Bella. Aro, who claims to be a vampire and goth, met Leah on a dating site in 2013. The duo instantly hit it off. Leo found Aro's vampire persona hypnotic and intriguing. After 3 weeks of dating, Aro proposed, and they've been living together ever since. Since they were spending the rest of eternity together, Aro decided to turn his lady love into a vampire. In an interview, Leah said Aro turned her early in the morning during witch hunting hours. He cut the back of his arm and offered his blood to her, and she did the same for him. She even mentioned that it took a day for the transformation to finish, and the experience was unreal. Now, if she hasn't had any blood in a long time, she feels weak. The couple made a ritual of drinking each other's blood once a week, and they even enjoy having raw steaks over a glass of pig's blood. Whether they go around biting people at night or sparking in the sunshine, we aren't sure, but it'd definitely be interesting to find out. Number 9. I love myself the most. Loving yourself is the first step in self-care, but one man took loving himself way too far. Liu Yi, a man from China, married himself back in 2007. Wondering how? Well, first, he got dressed for the occasion in a red tux and had professional photos taken. Then, he printed one of the photos onto a life-size cardboard cutout and married it. 100 guests attended the wedding. Most of them found the event quite confusing, while others said it was a grand wedding. One woman said that at first, she thought that it would be a group wedding. Among the guests was a psychologist. He described the marriage and Liu's behavior as abnormal. He said that psychologically, he seemed to be unwell. There's no doubt about that. In an interview, Yi said the reason he married himself was his dissatisfaction with reality. Also, it was a process of deconstructing and reconstructing himself. He said many might find his behavior ridiculous, but he is a fairly traditional man. His views on marriage just happen to be different from the norm. He even admitted to being a bit narcissistic, which we could have guessed. Can you imagine going on a date with yourself made out of cardboard? Number 8. Age is just a number. We all know age doesn't really matter when it comes to falling in love. Age is just a number, right? But some relationships push that idea to the max. Mackenzie Newcomb and Jeff Scholl have an age difference of 36 years. You might be saying, heard that before, but Mackenzie, 25, was initially engaged to Jeff's son, whom she had dated for 6 years. They were high school sweethearts. When she was with him, the 61-year-old Jeff, her would-be father-in-law, was going through a divorce. Like a good soon-to-be daughter-in-law, she became a pillar of comfort. But little did they know, the comfort was quickly turning into love. They soon started having an affair and eventually were caught by Jeff's wife and his son. Mackenzie didn't regret having an affair with Jeff after getting caught. She broke off her engagement and moved in with Jeff, and now they have a baby boy. Both Jeff and Mackenzie's family cut their ties, which doesn't seem to bother the strange couple. Still, Mackenzie is ready to apologize to all the people she hurt. Jeff even said that he wants to reconcile with his son soon. But how do you fix a relationship after such a shocking betrayal? Number 7. My fiancé is a doll. We've seen getting married to yourself, but what about marrying a doll? Jia Tianrong from Hong Kong lives with his parents and is married to a sex doll. Jia learned about his love for dolls at the age of 25. He wanted one sooner, but they were too expensive. Earlier in life, he had relationships with human girlfriends, but now he is only attracted to a doll named Mochi. In one of the interviews, Jia said that his real girlfriends always ask for too much, but Mochi never asked anything of him. Well, Mr. Tianrong, it's not alive. What do you expect? He even said that he never kissed or actually had sex with her because he's afraid it might damage the sensitive skin. For him, Mochi is the perfect companion and a very easygoing date. Jia treats her lavishly, and he loves dressing her up before taking pictures. Mochi owns 20 sets of expensive clothes and 10 pairs of shoes. He stated that if someone asked him to rate her out of 100, he would give her 1,000. He adds that living with her every day is pure bliss and that he is beyond happy. Number 6. Pillow love. How many of you like watching anime? Some dedicated anime fans get life-size pillows of their favorite characters to sleep with, or in this case, marry. Lee Jin-gyu from South Korea married his pillow. As a big fan of magical girl Lyrical Nanoha and loves one character named Fate Testarossa, so he purchased a full coverage pillow of Fate and slowly fell in love with it, truly, madly, and deeply. Guess it really was Fate. He dated it for 6 years before tying the knot. Lee, who was living a happy marriage, has one big advantage. He doesn't have to spend much on other pillows. The news was so fascinating that the Korean media filmed their wedding. Most people find this love story strange, and even said he might be doing it just as a publicity stunt. Lee brushed off all the criticism and stated that he's very much in love with his wife, and that his love for her will never change. He named his pillow Dakimura and said he goes on dates with her to malls, amusement parks, public parks, and many other places. Wherever he goes, she comes. As long as he's happy, that's all that matters. We think his waifu would agree. There are some really crazy relationships on our list today. If you like what you've seen, give us a like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Number 5. Daddy issues. Most of the stories so far have just been strange, but this next one is borderline illegal. John and Jenny Deves, the father and daughter duo, were in a relationship for 6 years. Jenny, who was John and his first wife's child, were separated after the divorce. According to Dorothy, his third wife, she always encouraged John to stay in touch with Jenny, since she was his first child, but little did Dorothy know that the touchy reunion would turn into an intimate one. Jenny and John said that they had not been in contact with each other until their reunion in 2000. The daughter, who was living with John and Dorothy, started having sexual relationships within the same house. The 12 years of marriage between John and Dorothy ended when he decided to move in with Jenny. In an interview, Jenny said that while living with her dad, she suddenly started seeing him as a man. She adored how loving, caring, and respectful he was, and slowly began developing feelings for him. Dorothy tried to separate them with the help of her mom, but failed every time. They even lodged complaints against them to the police, who were also after them. The couple escaped to South Australia, where they raised Jenny's children from under previous marriage and even had their own daughter. The couple split after court ordered a ban on such relationships in 2008, but started living together in 2009, casually in an open marriage. Number 4. Modern-day Oedipus. If you ever took sophomore English in the States, then you might have heard the tale of Oedipus and his mother. Some of you know him as the famous King of Thebes, and some of you may know him for having feelings for his mother. Monica and Caleb, a mother and son duo who live in New Mexico, got into a relationship after reuniting. Monica, at the age of 16, had to give up Caleb for adoption. The duo reunited in 2015 after finding each other on Facebook. At first, it was an emotional mother and son reunion, but later, it turned into an incestuous relationship. Monica, 36, said in an interview that when she saw Caleb, 20 at the time, after so long, she knew he was the one. She had butterflies after seeing him, and that it was love at first sight, but at the beginning, it was a motherly love. She even said that the moment Caleb saw Monica, he ran towards her and hugged her while crying. After living together, both soon started having romantic feelings towards each other, and she was the one who confessed first. She even stated that her family loves him as well. Due to incest being illegal in America, the duo faced lawsuits and even pled guilty. The police found them living in a mobile home, and they were ordered to stay apart for 18 months, and were also given 3 years of probation. While facing the lawsuits, Monica said that the love for each other is so strong, nothing can come between them. Not the kind of love story we ever want to hear again. Number 3. Doggo love. Who doesn't love dogs? These cute, innocent, mischievous creatures are always ready to melt our hearts. But some people take their loves for dogs too far. Amanda Rogers married her dog Sheba in 2012. She was married to a man a few decades prior, but it ended within a few months. Soon after the breakup, the Cupid arrow hit for the second time, making her realize her true love was for Sheba. The duo got married in Split, Croatia, in front of 200 people. She said that Sheba, who had been with her for years, always made her laugh and comforted her whenever she felt low, and that she couldn't think of a better partner. One day she got down on her knee and proposed to Sheba, and she could tell that the answer was yes, as her dog wagged her tail. Just like any other wedding, Amanda shared a kiss to close the deal. She even threw a bouquet of flowers. Amanda stated that even though she knew the wedding wasn't legal, it was still enough to make her happy. Sheba is always kind and loves her companion very much. So much for finding your perfect match. Number 2. I need you. Both. How many of you have heard of polyamory? If you haven't, don't worry. Polyamory means having more than one intimate relationship at the same time. 33-year-old Maria Butsky, who lives with her husband, 37-year-old Paul, and her 2 children, also lives with her 36-year-old lover, Peter. When she started having an affair with Peter, Maria left Paul to live with him, but soon started missing her husband and kids and realized she couldn't live without them. So she ended up living with both, and now they are one big, happy family. Maria said people might find it weird and think how could she possibly love 2 men, but she simply couldn't choose between them. She wholeheartedly loved both of them. When she left Paul, she felt a huge emptiness in her life, and thinking about a life without Peter was also heartbreaking. Paul said that he was really devastated when he first found out about the affair, but then he got to know Peter and realized how many things that both of them have in common. Paul feels like Peter is a surrogate dad to his kids. There is also no jealousy between them, and they manage to work like a team. Maria even said that both Peter and Paul don't sleep with her daily, but she sure does have sexual relationships with both the men. Peter sleeps on the sofa, while Paul sleeps in a room upstairs, and Maria sleeps with her eldest daughter. And number 1, real-life Game of Thrones. Who hasn't heard of Game of Thrones? One of the more controversial couples from the show was Cersei and Jaime Lannister. The sister and brother duo had 3 children together. Susan Karolewski and Patrick Stubing could be called the real Cersei and Jaime Lannister. The brother and sister were separated when Patrick was just 3 years old, along with his mother. His father, who was an alcoholic, attacked him with a knife. He was then adopted 4 years later by another family. Patrick, in the year 2000, was reunited with his sister and mother. He then later fell in love with Susan, who was 16 at the time. They started having sexual relations after their mother passed away in 2001, and they even had a child together. Patrick was actually sent to jail over the kid. When he was away, Susan was in a relationship with another man that also led to a baby. Soon after coming out of jail, Susan gave the right of this child to Patrick as well, and they went on to have 2 more children. There was a lawsuit against them, 3 out of 4 children are now looked after in foster care. Sadly, 2 of the children have disabilities. Their lawyer stated how risky it is to keep them apart from their parents. Patrick stated how the government has violated their life. The law against incestual relationships with brothers and sisters doesn't state that they can't protect their family.
Thanks for watching. If you were caught having a consensual and legal relationship with a co-worker which violated company rules and were given the choice to either end things or lose your job, what would you do and why? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe first.